we've got the new CFP rankings. Here's how the field shapes up going into championship weekend. Oregon, still the number 1 seed. They would play the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee, importantly in Columbus. We'll talk about that in a second. Texas, grabbing that number 2 spot. They would play the winner of Georgia, Indiana in the 7-10 game. The 3 seed would be SMU as the ACC champion, getting the bye. They would play the winner of Notre Dame and Alabama at the 11th spot. And the 4 seed, Boise State, being ranked higher than the Big 12 champion, so they would get the bye. And they would play the winner of Penn State and Arizona State. Chris, you were right. Let's start here. Ohio State. I hadn't looked at it as closely when we did the pod. You talked me into it. I think you're definitely right.
I yelled you into it.
You did yell me into it. That's okay. Ohio State, a better resume. I think it's hard for some people to swallow because there's a lot of Indiana disrespect out there. People don't really respect Penn State. There's still 2 top 10 wins. It just is what it is. You could say, well, Alabama's better than those 2 teams, and they might be. But 2 top 10 wins is more than 1 top 10 win, last I checked. I'm not sure how close this is, Chris. I think you were right.
Yeah, look, Ohio State, not only do they have 2 top 10 wins, they have a 1-point loss to the number 1 team. Based on how the committee views those teams, Ohio State's resume is way better than Tennessee. The Michigan and Arkansas losses cancel each other out. Ohio State's got a lot more wins and a better loss. Tennessee just has the Georgia win, the Alabama win, and that's pretty much it. So that's a big one because that's the 8-9. That's who is hosting whom for that first round game. That's why it mattered. That's why we talked about it. I got a lot of heat from Vol Twitter, David, whom you are very familiar with.
What?
Very familiar with them. They
Vol
were not
Twitter
happy
delivering
with me
heat?
and other people.
No way.
Who were making this case. But to me, I don't think it was even a debate. Ohio State over Tennessee is easy call.
Yeah, I think people just want to yell, they lost to Michigan. It's guys, 10 years we've been doing this. They care way more about who you beat than who you lose to. I've been saying this for months. People forget. Every time a team loses, they're out. Guess what? Bama's back. Damien, Tide sitting pretty right now.
Honestly,
what is it like to see them pop up ahead of Miami in there?
Well, it's good because, everybody's ready to tear down the Alabama dynasty and talk about what it is now. And I'm not going to lie, I've been one of those people. But at the end of the day, they still have an opportunity to play for a college football championship. So really nothing to this point matters. I mean, they have essentially, if they get in, they have a clean slate, and it's all about what you do in the playoffs. So really, Alabama, yes, but all the teams in that lower tier, you got to just be grateful for the opportunity, regardless of what you've been through, who you beat, who you lost to, just the fact that you got the opportunity to still make it in. I mean, a lot of people should be thanking all of those that complained to get this playoff field expanded, because if not, there would be a lot of people very unhappy right now.
I do think
I'm of 2 minds on this. One, I get Alabama's had a lot of lowlights. I feel like if Miami had lost by 3 touchdowns to Oklahoma, they'd be viewed a little bit differently. But they do have a win over Georgia. That does matter. That's a big win in their mind. And so I get the complaints. Do I also think Alabama is one of the 12 best teams, even though it's not really the 12 best? But, it is what it is. It's kind of silly that I generally think if we're talking about just on the field, Miami probably deserves to be in over them, but I also get it. I think Miami has been shaky all year long, and so when you look at that 1 fewer loss and not as many good wins, I sort of get where they're coming from on it.
I think it was pretty simple. Miami has no top 25 wins.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama has 3 top 20 wins.
They needed Louisville to get in there, and they didn't.
Yeah, they did. And when you start getting to multiple losses, then you kind of lose that margin for error.
Mm-hmm.
And it's why SMU is 4 spots or 3 spots ahead of Alabama right now, which we'll get into in a second. I honestly, I don't have that much of an issue with Alabama over Miami. They have much better wins. Miami has better losses. And ultimately, in many of these situations, when you're comparing teams kind of in that same tier, committee will often go with the teams with the better wins.
Chris, I want to throw a scenario out there for you because right now Alabama's looking good. Clemson, if they steal a bid, but they don't beat SMU too badly, SMU will fall. Then it gets real interesting because you've got to kind of figure that out. It looks like if that happens, you might bump up Ohio State and Tennessee to both hosting. And if it comes down to SMU versus Alabama, Ward Manuel was asked about it. He basically said, I can't predict the future, blah, blah, blah. No hypotheticals. It does depend. Like, if you lose on a last-second field goal, I think that's a lot different than if you lose 41-10. But that is the scenario where if you're listening to this and you are pounding the dashboard wanting Alabama out of the field, that's probably the only route. But it's gonna be close. Chris, do you feel like, other than, even if they do lose 41-10, it might not be a lock, but do you feel like that's the only route for SMU to be out and Alabama to be in? Because I think at this point, if you're Miami, if you're Ole Miss, if you're South Carolina, you can probably just do something else Sunday afternoon.
They are out. Ward Manuel said the teams that aren't playing are locked in, so that they can't jump Alabama. So Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina, it was a good run, but you're done. The only opportunity for drama on Sunday as it relates to the field is if Clemson beats SMU, and we have to debate SMU or Alabama for that last at-large spot. Alabama 9-3, 3 top 20 wins, 2 losses to 6-6 teams, including a 21-point loss to Oklahoma. SMU doesn't have many great wins. Louisville's not a top 25 team, so they don't have that. Their losses would be to BYU, who's top 20, and Clemson, who would be top 20. So you got 2 losses, 3 losses. Ultimately, I believe that if you have SMU already 3 spots ahead of Alabama now, you can't really bring in the strength of schedule stuff because SMU plays an extra game. You can't penalize SMU too much for playing an extra game after going undefeated in their conference. And then because they play an extra game, you're then going to jump them over by a 3-loss team that has 2 losses to 6-6 teams. I don't think it should happen. That's the conspiracies that are out there now. Everybody's preparing themselves. Well, if SMU loses, Alabama's going to win because the committee loves the SEC and it's going to be better for TV ratings and ESPN wants it and yada, 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 because they're pointing to what happened last year with Florida State. I cannot overstate how much the committee damaged its brand and its image by putting Alabama in over Florida State last year.
Yes.
It fueled every SEC ESPN conspiracy that fans like to have, and it negated the purpose of playing and winning games. Now, I don't think those conspiracies are necessarily true. I understand why they did it. I don't agree with why they did it.
Yes.
Because remember, in 2022, TCU lost the Big 12 championship game.
Didn't move.
But they still got in over Alabama while Nick Saban went on Fox and was campaigning for his team to get in.
Vegas, the Nick Saban yelling about point spreads was quite a thing on TV.
They didn't get in. So within the last 2 years, we have 2 data points here. They don't always just go with the extra SEC team. So I would calm people down, but I don't blame people for having that thought process because of what happened to Florida State.
I do think in the conference champions we may move some seeds, but if the ACC holds, it's kind of amazing, Chris. I think the committee is going to get to the finish line, and the field seems pretty cut and dry if SMU wins. Clemson's got no shot. Big 12 losers got no shot. Nobody's going to bump up. The 12 is going to be pretty set as long as SMU wins. The other conference championships will just kind of be for seeding if that happens.